substitutes. Chair, before we go into the meeting, do you just want to explain about masks and
yeah, social distancing, we're all got keeping our seats and not getting closer to anyone else. When you speak, you're allowed to take the mask off, but you need to put it back on when you haven't spoke. I've been told to keep mine off for the whole meeting for some other reason, but that's quite good. And there's one way out and one way in. So hopefully we'll keep doing that. First item on the agenda is the appointment of vice chair. Nominations, anyone? Councillor Maxwell? Councillor Button, we got a second on Councillor Button. Thank you. Any other nominations? Those in favour, please show. Councillor Button. That's nearly announced. Yeah, that's been agreed. Declarations of interest, anyone? Councillor Student?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just a matter of clarity on all item on Fairmont Close. I call this in not because of a pre-determination, but because of local interest in the application.
Okay, I'd just like to say I also know one of the objectors, Councillor Chris sitting up there as well. Thank you. We'll move on now until the minutes of the last meeting. Do we all agree they're quick record for those who are here? Thank you. We're on to planning applications, and the first one is one for Fairmont Close. And I'll ask
Catherine to do that.
Catherine, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This application is for household extensions at number 1 Fairmont Close. The extensions include a single-storey side/front extension and a 2-storey extension to the rear. As you can see from this location plan, the property is one of only 4 dwellings of Fairmont Close, and Fairmont Close itself comes off Lime Tree Road on the top. The buildings are understood to have been built roughly at the same time, dating out the 1960s. However, they are all slightly different in design, though they all have similarities in style. Next door to the site, to the southeast, lies a Grade 2 star listed dwelling, number 13 Lime Tree Road, and right alongside the boundary of the site is a glass house, which will be mentioned later. And then to the southwest of the site is a residential area called Hunting Close. And you'll see there's a semi-detached dwelling that faces the rear garden of the site. So as you can see, the property itself is very central. It is staggered with the immediate neighbour number 2. So its rear boundary wall is actually set further east than number 2's. There's a large cedar tree in the front garden. And there's several trees in the rear garden as well. But the cedar tree to the front is the main tree consideration. The proposal includes the 2-storey rear extension at the rear. This is now a hitch roof. And to the side, a single-storey side/front extension, which includes a double garage to the front. And then along the side is a multi-purpose room, and it incorporates an existing study at the far end of that section as well. On to the next one. So this is the first slide of the elevations. So as you can see, the roof is hipped to the rear. The ridge height is slightly lower than the main dwelling, and there's a single window in that elevation, which will be facing number 2. Front elevation, you can see again dual pitch roof serving garage and rooms to the rear. This is the view from the rear. So you've got the bedroom window at the top, and at the bottom, the window serving the kitchen and diner. The proposed elevation at the bottom is the view, which would be from number 13 Lime Tree Road. So the dwelling is grade 2 star listed. And the image at the front is the glass house. Photos, please. Oh, sorry. So this is the existing footprint. So as I mentioned, there's an existing snug off the side, which is single story flat roofed. And so the proposed is to incorporate that into the extension. And as you can see, there's nothing off the rear of the range at all. And these are just the floor plans are proposed. So you've got the double garage at the front, multi-purpose room, and then the snug, and then the ground floor of the rear extension provides for a larger kitchen diner, and then a reconfiguration upstairs, including a master bedroom. So this photo shows the front of the site. We've got the cedar tree in the front garden, and then there's a paved area, and then you've got the front elevation, and you can see just in front of the front elevation is the glass house in the next property. The terrace fencing was up at the time that I visited. As I understand, the new owners discovered a flood leak, and so they had to get builders in to sort that as soon as they took ownership. So the works haven't started off for this proposal. This is the front elevation. So as you can see, there's the flat roof serving the current carport, and then just behind that, the existing stuff. And to the right of that front elevation is the sloping roof of number 2 Fairmont, which we'll see a bit more. So this is the rear elevation. Fairly self-explanatory. You've got the flat roof snug on the right, and then the 2-story rear extension would come out as we're looking at it on the left-hand side. This is a view taken from the road. So as I mentioned previously, and as we saw from the location plans, the properties are staggered quite significantly. So the gable sits quite far forward of number 2's gable, and the property number 2 has got cat slide style roof. So at the front it's quite long, starts at the top of the second floor as first floor, and then goes all the way to the bottom. And this picture shows the relationship with the glass house. So as you can see, the current carport is very close to the boundary. It's 0.25 metres away from the boundary, whereas the snug is pulled a bit further away. It's 1.25 metres from the boundary. This picture is looking towards Partswood Close. So these are the semi-detached dwellings that look towards the rear elevation of the dwelling. This viewpoint looks from the front elevation of both number 1 and number 2, and it shows the relationship between the 2 properties. So at the moment there isn't much boundary treatment at all, and as I said, the terrace fencing has been put up because of the works to address the flooding. Or the leak rather, within the pipes in the house. This elevation, I'll also come back to later. This is showing the side elevation of number 2. And as you can see, they have some windows directly looking onto the site. So this is particularly interesting when I'm going to talk about feminism. So this, the report identifies 5 main issues. The first one is design. So we might go back to the elevation slides. So the rear extension is considered to be subordinate in design, whilst it is relatively large in the fact that it would extend 6 metres from the rear elevation. As you can see, the ridge height has been dropped to lower than the main ridge height. Following discussions with the agent, the design has been changed from a gable end to a pit end, which would reduce its mass. The extension, the rear extension would be visible from the main road, but it would be seen very much in the context of the rest of the properties. So yes, it would partially block some of that visual gap between number 1 and 2, but it would be seen in the context of the gable end of the main dwelling at the moment, and it would still provide some gap. So that's not considered to be out of character of the area. The single story section, again, it does have quite a large footprint, but the plot itself is fairly large, and it wouldn't be inconceivable to think of a property of this size, on a plot of this size, to have a double garage in the front garden. It's because it's linked to the side extension that as an entirety it might appear quite big. However, you wouldn't really read the scale. From the road, you would see predominantly the garage section, and from the neighbouring property, most of that is screened by the glass house, and you've got that large cedar tree, which is within that front garden, which is the predominant feature. So you're not going to read that garage as the focus point within this part of the place. The next issue is heritage. Sorry, David, can we go to the shadow analysis? So as I've mentioned, the Jason property is grade 2 star listed. The glass house itself isn't not the listing, but because of the date of the listing, the glass house is considered listed by association. And so the concern or the area to consider in terms of whether it has an acceptable impact on the glass house is whether it allows the glass house to function as its intended use. So in light of that, we asked the agent to supply some shadow analysis for middle of the summer, and I've included a few slides from this, one of which is in the morning, which is this slide. Next is around about noon, and then the evening. So as you can see, in terms of the glass house in the neighbouring property, yes, it will have an impact, but existing property has an impact. And because of the orientation of glass house, it's still enjoying a significant amount of sun from that southeast position. Further to this, it's not at all unusual for glass houses of this age to be built alongside a brick wall. So the impact on glass house is considered negligible in this case. The next issue to talk about is the amenity. Go to the picture of the two properties side by side. Perfect, thank you. So the side/front extension, as I've mentioned, it will be alongside the boundary of number 30, just briefly mention this. We don't think this is going to have a significant impact on any neighbour, partially because of what it's built alongside and also its height. The rear extension will have some impact, particularly on number 2, which is the property to the right. So as we can see, the boundary at the moment has no treatment within permitted development rights. So what you can do without planning, either neighbour could choose to put up a 2-metre wall or fence along that boundary without planning permission. From this point of view, it's also worth noting that the different distance between the rear extension and property would be 5.7 metres, which is considered to be a fair distance. We go to elevation number 2. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So number 2 actually has 7 windows within this elevation. Because of the slightly unusual layout of this close, these windows currently enjoy quite a lot of light. It's understood that the windows on the first floor serve in the bathroom, and 2 of these windows, I believe it's like the L-shape grouping, serve the bathroom that's split glazed. The impact on bathroom windows, and including these ones, is considered acceptable. It's not a primary room. The windows are mainly used for ventilation to allow sunlight in. The other window serves a bedroom. However, this bedroom also benefits from windows looking straight into the rear garden. And so whilst there would be some loss of light there, that bedroom should still enjoy a good level of light. On the ground floor, you've got a very high level window that's sort of hiding behind that fence. That's a high level window, which again is one of the few windows serving the lounge. So the lounge has got several windows facing into the garden. The ones to note are the ones on the right, which serve a study. And it's understood that these windows are the only windows serving this room. The extension will have an impact upon the study. However, as we've talked about, the distance from this room is 5.7 metres. It currently enjoys an unusually high level of outlook and light because the lack of the boundary treatment. When you look at permitted development, in addition to a 2-metre fence, the applicants could also choose to put a 3-metre deep rear extension in place if it was sited just a little bit further away, so 7 metres, or they could put a single story extension up right alongside the boundary with eaves up to 3 metres and a maximum height of 4 metres. So when we consider the impact of all the options open to them under permitted development compared to the impact upon the 2-story rear extension, it's not considered that significantly different to warrant a refusal based on this impact. In the report, one of the other mentions is the progress. Having talked to the agent, the applicants are already looking to install suds in the rear garden. So the progress is purely as a result of being a critical drainage area, not at risk in terms of fluvial or any other type of flooding. As I mentioned previously, there's a rather large cedar tree in the front garden. A monthly report has been submitted together with a agricultural impact assessment and tree protection plan, and details of how the development could be built not to impact significantly on the tree. Our tree officer has reviewed this and suggested several conditions which would allow the impact to be acceptable. And because of the nature of the front extension as a garage, there isn't considered to be conflict between the use and the garages. So what I mean by that, if the front extension was to be used as a main living area, people might wish to chop down a tree or reduce it further because of the lack of light. But as it's a garage, there's not considered to be that conflict in the future. So moving on to the update report, just to quickly revise the reason for Council Institute recording application in. As you would have heard, we called it in because of the local rules. So apologies a slight for that. We have received one statement from a neighbour, which from David will read shortly. And one of the neighbours that has come to speak today has provided us with some images, which I believe we've got our copies of. So conclusion, the application has been referred to committee because the level of local interest, and we recommend it.
Thank you, Kat, for that. As you say, we have got some speakers here. The first one is John Driscoll.
Chair, we've got that.
Would you do that first? David, will you read the statement?
Thank you, Chair. This is a statement received from one of the neighbours, so I'll be reading it verbatim. Context is everything. The planners of City Council may well have dismissed the objections to this planning application according to the letter of planning regulations, but they have failed to give sufficient weight to the location or appreciate the environment the house sits in, despite a few cursory acknowledgements. Community and surroundings. The area around Fairmount Close lies just on the edge of a conservation area and has long enjoyed a semi-rural feel despite its urban situation. This excessive development jeopardises that enjoyment for everybody. This is a backward step at a time when we are more aware of harming the natural environment and the dangers of the spread of unregulated development. Three aspects of this application are damaging. One, the scale of the actual house and garage extension. Two, the detrimental effect on the 40-foot cedar, some 150 years old, in the front garden. And three, the potential structural damage to the next door glass house during construction. The house development. The facts reveal extensive extensions along the side and at the back of the property. Such scale is totally inappropriate for both the size of the plot and its situation within a small close of 4 houses, all built at the same time and in the same style and scale. The side extension of some 20 metres is single storey, but it has an extraordinarily high-pitched roof. Nearly 10 metres of the extension protrude beyond the front of the house to provide a double garage. This will look oppressive and detract from the overall ambience of the close. The garage also protrudes across the front of the house by a further metre, which will look incoherent and ugly. The side extension will significantly reduce the view enjoyed from any property looking through to Flansman's Close, currently offering a green outlook. The 2-storey extension at the back, estimated at 6 metres deep, will bring the building uncomfortably close to the immediate neighbour and gardens of the residents in Flansman's Close. Their privacy will be adversely affected. At the front of the house, just beyond the cedar, an impressive glass house dating from 1908 and recently restored, forms the boundary between 1 Fairmount Close and 13 Lime Tree Road. The proposed side extension must pose a risk to the structure and purpose of the glass house. Arboricultural concerns. Excavations have already been carried out on the drive in front of the house using a JCB and heavy lifting gear. This work was within the root area of the magnificent cedar. The arboricultural assessment acknowledges the amenity value of the tree and sets out detailed conditions on how future work should be undertaken to protect the tree. I understand that this will be delegated to an expert, Will City Council have any continuing role? Who will be responsible for any sanctions in the event of any default? Please statement, Chair.
Okay. Come on to speakers now, the first one is John Fiscal, and you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Can you just bear with me once I get Mr. Driscoll's slides up? please?
Yes, no problem.
Good morning, councillors. I live in number 2 Fairmark Close, adjacent to the development. I have got some slides. You could go through them slowly as I go through the process. I didn't know that was going to happen, but the information supporting this statement is in this pamphlet. Our foremost concern is the implementation of planning policy DM2, amenity for existing occupiers, which states development will be permitted where it would not result in an unacceptable impact on the amenity of the area or the living or working conditions or operations of neighbouring occupants. Particular regard will be given to the prevention of overlooking and the loss of privacy, and B, the prevention of overshadowing and the loss of light and outlook. Contrary to the planning officer's report, I would argue that a study or home office can be a primary room within a dwelling. Both my wife and I work from home. We are freelance designers. We spend the day working behind a workstation within our own home office. Even before the pandemic, we, as so many others do, selected an abode that would facilitate working from home. I cannot see how it can be justified in this age that a home office can be considered to have no weight in terms of impact concerning amenity. The future for many people is home working, and I am concerned that our loss of amenity has not been considered fair. The home office in question enjoys a southeastern outlook and of course benefits from wonderful direct sunlight throughout the year. Dear councillors, can you imagine the impact of replacing the beautiful long vista of sky and Scotch pine trees with a 6 metre by 5 metre mass of yellow bricks? This is not a conducive environment for creativity. A 3D sun shadow clearly showed that the southeast elevation would be significantly overshadowed by the proposed rear extension. Winter solar gain and illumination levels to our interior will be significantly reduced by the termination of direct sunlight by the mass of the rear extension. I acknowledge that the permitted development could allow a smaller footprint extension to be built without planning permission. Frankly, a 3 metre deep, 2-storey rear extension sited at least 7 metres away would be far more preferable. At this length, it would not block the main office window, a far better option than having 6 windows entirely blocked. Throughout the design process, a compromise has never been tabled to mitigate these problems. I believe a reduction in length to the proposed rear extension would at least allow more light in winter months to reach the office and preserve some outlook from my daughter's bedroom and the lounge. A reduction of length would not have a significant effect. A reduction of length would not have a significant impact on a large kitchen design that incorporates a pantry or the large bedroom that absorbs a dressing room. Despite our objections, we are not averse to change and the regeneration of 1 Fairmount Close. However, that's right, I've got one next sentence, okay.
Yep.
However, the proposed designs demonstrate a lack of respect for the amenity of our home and will impair the living and working conditions that exist. There are creative solutions available to prevent overshadowing, loss of light and outlook, which could have been developed to provide an acceptable solution. Thank you.
Our second speaker is Carol Robert. Carol, and you have 3 minutes as well. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I live at 3 Fairmark Close, and so I'm very near to the proposed development. There's a great deal I could say, but because of the constraints of time, I'm only going to speak about the things that concern me personally. Firstly, there are only 4 houses in our close, and the approach road is short and very narrow and includes a sharp angle turning to get to the property under discussion. The heavy vehicles that have already been involved in the preliminary building work have not only damaged the road, and in fact ruts have had to be filled in because of the damage that has been done, but they are also damaging my front garden as they swing round to approach into Old Fairmont Close. They will inevitably cause more damage if this plan is given the go-ahead. Secondly, the proposed extension to the back of the property will cut the amount of light that comes into my back garden also. This may not be a garden worthy of a stately home, but I have worked on it for the past 40 years and feel it would be very unfair if all that work has been for nothing. Thirdly, and for me, this is the most important point of all, the 4 houses in the close and the 2 houses either side of the approach on Lime Tree Road were built as 8 parts of a complete design. They are all different in subtle and intriguing ways, but they complement each other superbly and are a fitting testament to their architect and to the builders who could not have worked to a higher standard. I would claim that within the city there are no other mid-20th century domestic dwellings that come anywhere near the excellence both in design and construction of these 8 parts of significant whole. And it has for a long time puzzled and saddened me that this little complex has not been given the attention or respect that I feel it deserves. The houses should certainly be protected against the whims, however well-intentioned, of any new purchaser, as any serious change to any one of them has a detrimental effect on the overall design. It is not only our large civic buildings that need to be cared for, but also the smaller domestic dwellings that will tell future generations so much about our own social and artistic history. As respected institutions such as the 20th century society are at pains to point out, the historic worth of a building is not reliant on the length of time that it has been in existence. It may be reckoned in decades as well as in centuries. And for this reason, I would ask you to rule that the house at 1 Fairmont Close should be kept as far as possible within the confines of its original blueprint. Thank you.
Thank you. We have another speaker, Chris Sedgwick. Chris, you have 3 minutes as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I have only 3 minutes, councillors, to try to persuade you to override your planning advisors. It's a difficult task, but all the decision makers today. First of all, some facts for you. Number 1 Fairmont Close was bought at auction last December for £682,000. At that time, it was described as a comfortable, spacious 4-bedroom house with an integral garage, but needing some updating. As you've heard, earlier this year, considerable building works have already begun, and heavy machinery has been on the site. And the big cedar tree has already seen several pieces of branches removed. Now those living nearby, and I am, are faced with these proposals that are ambitious but excessive. They pay scant regard to the local environment, and they will set a terrible precedent for such developments to carry on in the area. These proposals are far from a simple and understandable update. To illustrate my point, the first floor will have 4 bedrooms, plus 3 bathrooms and a dressing room. The ground floor plan is even grander. It will contain a kitchen, a dining room, plus an office, plus a utility room, plus a garden room, plus the snug, plus the large multi-purpose room. That's not what it is. I calculate that the overall ground floor area will be increased by about 70%. And in order to accommodate those ambitions, these proposals, with all their damaging consequences, are thrust upon us. An enormous project And your planners have carefully dissected and dismantled the 5 major objections. That is not the whole of the story. And particularly offensive to me is the excessive height of the so-called single-story yard at the front, well illustrated as in the barn-like illustration on the right at the top. Document put forward by John Driscoll. It reaches right up to the eaves of the roof of the main story house. It's visually rather like an industrial building on a retail park, and it's unnecessary.
Chris, you hit for 3 minutes, I'm all right.
I suppose if this huge project is approved, you will not have your responsibilities as guardians. You will allow an awful precedent and development on this scale and seized upon by other developers as a notable precedent, and this part of town close will suffer permanently. Please do not go down there.
Thank you, Chris. We also have the agent here, which is Duggan, and Newell 6 minutes. Thank you.
We have worked with the officer closely throughout the consultation period, which in fact has been extended twice at the officer's request. As you have heard, the property stands on a large plot and been lived in by the original purchasers since new. This is a property which welcomes a young couple about to have their first child who want to remain to raise a young family. Members have been made aware of the previously undetected water leak. The arrival of the Harris fence caused concern with adjoining owners, quite rightly so, as they assumed the proposed extension work had already started without planning permission. Not the case. Properties in need of upgrading to present day standards. The design proposals were based on the applicant's requirements to achieve this, while at the same time providing the increased accommodation planned young family well within the development allowance for the size of the surrounding plot area. In reference to the case officer's report, we have noted the representations made by the adjoining owners, which also formed part of our work with the case officer to ensure that measures were taken to try and answer or appease these objections. It should be noted that the drawings just show a presentation in 2 dimensions. The elevations will be seen truly in perspective. We consider the rear 2-story extension. Closest property is number 2, which has a selection of windows, one of which serves as study, a room still considered as non-habitable facing the application. As the officer has confirmed, the initial roof design has been revisited and reduced from gable end to hip to allow sunlight when available. However, it should be remembered that natural ambient light exists all the time. The hours of direct sunlight can be limited. We are aware that the applicant has been in regular contact with the owner of number 2, who we understand has accepted the offer of a 2-metre high fence running from the rear boundary to the back of the future detached double garage in front of the building line, proposed on the Planning Permission 19/00176. In our opinion, the provision of this fence tends to contradict their concern about loss of light, certainly ground floor, giving their priority policy to privacy and security between dwellings instead. When looking at the proposed footprint, it can be seen this rear extension forms an opposing projection to that found in the front elevation, thus balancing the massing. If we now consider the front single-story extension, the design emanates from the principles of existing standard carport footprints already in place along that side, spaced away from the existing conservatory to number 13. The extension shows the opportunity to replace the ugly flat roofs with an asymmetric tile design which follows through from front to back. The lower eaves height facing number 13, which in turn provides additional privacy. With reference to the case officer's main issue design and heritage, we feel that our earlier comments support the case officer's response to all the planning policies and points raised under the representation concerns. Do not feel any further comment is required. Amenity. We feel the impact issues lie with the site of the rear extension when looking from the end of number 2 and have been adequately covered by the case officer. Evidence was also provided to show sun on a clear day of round extension and the impact on number 2. It should be remembered this property already has 2 planning permissions, one for remodeling and 2 for a detached garage, as previously mentioned, both of which could change its own impact on number 1, in particular the detached double garage in front of the building line, which has been used in the planning statement as a reason for extending forwards and south. Flood risk. As no mention was contained in the report, it should be noted that we obtained current advice from the Environment Agency with no flood risk. However, mitigation has been included within the AIA, and our proposal is to take new surface water to the rear garden to alleviate the maturity of the trees on this site of their own requirements to survive big groundwater trees. The horticulturist has considered the whole site in his assessment and has put in place a stringent mitigation, especially for cedar tree T1 in the frontage, which requires belated husbandry anyhow. Being noted, our design and main issue 4 takes into consideration the routes of the new surface water drainage, thus avoiding its root bolts required. Thank the case officer for all the work preparing the planning report, and together with this statement, trust that the members will support the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Catherine, did you want to come back and answer any questions?
Yes, I just wanted to pick up on the query in the statement about the agricultural implications. At the end of the report, I've set out recommended conditions. I think there's about 4 that relate to the tree. 5. So one of these will actually require the applicants to submit further information to us. Which is number 7, the exploratory excavations, and the rest I believe are largely sort of in sync with the report to make sure that the recommendations by our horticulturists are followed through. So the response to the statement would be yes, we are still going to be involved. If we don't expect it to happen, but if anything does happen, then we do have powers to act.
Okay, thank you for that. We'll move on to members' questions now. Any questions, Councillor Maxwell?
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask if it's known if any of the 3 other houses in this block have had extensions? Looking at page 16, and it's very tiny drawing, it looks as though they seem to be quite a lot bigger than the one that we're looking at. Do we have any information on that?
It's my understanding that some of them have been extended, not as much as proposed today. I believe they're largely single-story extensions, and as the agent mentioned, the immediate neighbour number 2 has had 2 previous planning commissions approved, one of which was quite a big reworking, so it looked completely different. And I think that included extensions. And then the more recent one was a double garage to the front, which I believe is also, I think the last one is extent, I'm not sure about. The more comprehensive than that.
Thank you.
So can I just add to that? The position of the double garage is shown on this drawing here, proof number 2. That was a 2019 reference.
Not very clear from this view. I don't really see the dotted line.
Okay, well,
Yeah,
it's here.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, okay.
I'm having difficulty, to be quite honest, in the scale of this. Working on, it looks as though the one that we're talking about is only about half the size of the other three. And would it make so much difference if it was made up to this?
I think I kind of reinterpret the point that I think you made. Is it about the kind of the footprint that you're seeing, for example, on the plans here? Yeah, I mean that's and the comment was made by one of the speakers about the percentage increase in the ground floor area as a result of this application. I mean that is one of the points that we're making in the committee report, that given the size of the plots, the increase in the size, purely looking at the footprint, any other issues about any to the side, but purely looking at the footprint, it would result in a property which has a comparable footprint to some of the others on Fairmont Close.
That's true.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'll start with tree, if I may. I've got a few questions. Just relating to the tree, in paragraph 63, it refers to works being carried out in accordance with the report. Development may lead to some signs of stress within the short to medium term, which is a contradiction to the general approach to this tree, the general heard about the tree. So my question there is what is the real risk to this tree in terms of any point in the future, not just near to short, not just the short to medium term. So I'd like someone to expand on that, please.
I actually discussed this with our tree officer before clarification myself. His response was that the development may have result in some initial stress to the tree. However, that shouldn't result in any long-term damage. Hence, the end of that sentence describes the short to medium term. However, as part of mitigation to that was condition 7, which is exploratory excavations by air spade. So that should minimise any stress at all in the initial, in the short to medium term, but he wasn't concerned about the long-term health of that tree as a result of the proposed.
Me.
Thank you for that. Just in response to Councillor Maxwell's question, I think perhaps the photograph of the design supplied by Mr. Bristol probably shows the extent of the massing. So my next question is sort of related to that. And that is the greenhouse. It's a shame that we haven't seen better photographs of the greenhouse next door, because it looks magnificent. And it's the first time I've seen it. I was hoping to see a little bit more. I was looking under DM9, and I wondered whether this is a significant heritage asset in its own right, and if it is, therefore, the mass of this project could potentially be a reason for refusal. Respond to that, please.
Again, I talked to our conservation design officer about this proposal. It's probably quite good to refer to the design conservation comments on page 19 at this point. So he sort of outlined that, sorry, give everyone a second. So he's outlined that the glass house is listed by association, and it is in itself considered to contribute to the special character of the host building and benefit from its own special character. But he does go on to say that doesn't anticipate any physical impact, and the way to assess applications of this nature is, would it allow the building to continue its use, which is why the focus has been on the shadow analysis at the end of my presentation. The view from a glass house is already of the 1960s close, and so the addition of the single-story extension along the boundary is not considered to be significant in that setting, particularly when you take into consideration the vegetation and notably the cedar tree alongside it. But notwithstanding that, the focus should be on the use of the glass house, which the impact isn't considered to be significant.
Thank you. Can I come back on that, please? DM9 talks about significance of heritage assets and the impact that the development might have on those. Given the size of this, there is an argument, I think, for that. And we had a conversation about this just before we called it in. And at that time, you did say that it was finding balance, which is not necessarily reflected in the report. I think what I'm saying here is that DM9 suggests that new heritage assets can come to light through the planning process. I wonder if this particular glass house, which does look particularly unfounded, might come into that category, into the new category.
Can I comment on that? I don't think it does, because it's within the curtilage of an existing listed structure, so the presence of the asset was known. So it's I mean, you're quite right. Sometimes you can actually kind of discover something that has significance and it's not recorded. But in this case, this is a structure within the curtilage of a listed building, creative style listed building. So it's there, it's known. The fact that there's this application adjacent to it doesn't increase the significance of the glass house over and above what it had as a structure within the purpose of a listed building, and hence the assessment that the conservation and design officer has done focuses on: is there a physical impact upon the glass house? No, there isn't. Is there an impact upon the function of the glass house, which contributes to the character of the listed building? No, there isn't. The impact upon the heritage assets is less than substantial in this case.
Okay, so just finally on that, then, could the massing of the property itself, as well, and also the roof, the roof of the immediately adjacent part of the building is going to be raised there rather than the flat roof that's existing. Does that massing of the property as a whole, and especially directly next to it, have an impact on the significance of the asset next door?
No. Sorry, our response to that is no, it doesn't.
And three more, Councillor Bergeron first, then Councillor Lovett, and Councillor Susan.
Thank you. I'd just like to come back on the point that Councillor Maxwell made, because I think the outline can be a bit deceptive, because if you can see in those pictures, that's what I understand, that they are single story. So while they might have a bigger footprint, correct me if I'm wrong, you know, it's about judging whether it's within character. And to me, it looks like the other buildings are, you know, much lower in rising. And I've got two questions. One is sort of a little bit related to that. I mean, to me, it looks like there is a building line at that close, and to me, it looks like that front extension would cross that building line quite significantly, but I haven't seen any discussion of a building line in the report. Is my first question. And then the second one is, could you just clarify whether the front extension is comes to where currently the carport is, or comes to the kind of the less intrusive bit where it's the snug extension that there is currently.
Could you go to the existing footprint, please? There's a couple of slides on. Sorry, I'll answer your question backwards. So that car that you can see on the plan to the left, that's the carport. And then you've got the snug just behind it. So
And where because the snug is kind of is slightly more, I see, thank you, that I'm visible.
oh, yeah, perfect, thank you. So in terms of the building line, yes, there is, but the properties are all quite staggered and all quite different here. And given that this property is at the end of the close, it's felt that it wouldn't, it was in the middle of a row of properties, it might stick out. But it would seem very much in context of that's the end of the close and that's the sort of focal point of the tree in the existing house. You also talked about the mass of the other properties. Number 2 is certainly a cat's slide design. And from memory, I think, Rich, you might be able to confirm, one of the other properties is also cat slide, but the other one is also dual pitch like this. So those 4 and also the 4 sort of either side of the entrance to the close, they're all a mixture of, like a usual dual pitch and cat slide.
And I mean, I understand what you say about the building. My interpretation would be different, I guess, too, because I think it shows a very clear. It's very difficult to judge these things unless you stand close, but from those pictures, it seems to me that there is a clear building line which would be disrupted by the. I don't know if that's, am I allowed to argue? Or is it an interpretation that we can make on this?
I think from our point of view, it's the properties are set at a regular distance from the front of the road with a regular design, with no variation in terms of porches, carports, garages, front extensions. So you don't go into the close and see a very fixed central character. There's certainly a character there. And it's certainly clear that they're all built together and there's, intent in that. So there's, some sense of style and character there, but it's not from our point of view a very sort of fixed, like you see Victorian houses in the city, it's sort of that regulated.
Councillor.
Sorry.
Chair.
Yes, David.
Sorry, can I was asked after the last meeting, just to remind people that if you're not speaking, please to put masks on. Catherine, it's fine, you're doing a lot of speaking, but other, unless it's the officer that's speaking, all members, keep their masks on, please. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, could I
Yes,
just
David.
come back on the Councillor Bowman's point? I mean, sometimes it's difficult to establish whether or not there's a building line or not. Obviously, it's very obvious when you've got a row of 10 streets, there's a building line. If you were, to my mind, if you were saying that there's a building line here, you'd have to kind of look along or somewhere like this and the closest point. So there is this kind of uniformity to the kind of way that they're laid out diagonally. But if you agree with my interpretation, then, and you kind of drew a line parallel to the road and parallel to the fronts of the houses, I don't think the single story extension would actually extend that far beyond a building line which was drawn in that way. You might kind of choose to draw a building line differently, but
well, I think if you take that in combination with the character of how exactly they're staggered like this, if you call it a strict line, but there is clearly a pattern of how they're positioned, which is disrupted by that garage sticking out.
there is, although the point that I would make is there are other structures in the close that already kind of do that, and there is a planning permission next door that does that as well. So that there is some precedent for putting structures in front of the plane of the main house.
Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. The cedar tree, the first question is, has it got a tree preservation order on it? I don't think it's mentioned anywhere. And also the distance of the tree from the end of the single-storey extension. That would be interesting to know that distance. And then back to Councillor Stukeley's issue with the greenhouses. I think it says in the report 1.25 metres, the single-storey extension would be from the green grass houses. I mean, is there no concern about the damage that might be caused by the building of this extension so close to these, well, I should imagine fairly vulnerable, over 100 years old, and if they were to be compromised in any way, physically, is that not sort of compromising the grade 2 listed building? And finally, the large extensions that are proposed, are there to be any energy saving adaptations in these extensions? It's almost like a new build, it's big enough to house a new property in terms of the actual sort of square meters. So it would be interesting to know if there were any energy saving adaptations. Thank you.
In terms of the TPO, no, there isn't. The tree officer has noted that it does have it does have a high immunity value, but following our sort of practices, there isn't a direct risk to it to be removed or anything like that. So we didn't feel that it warranted a TPO based on that. The distance, I don't have that measurement, I'm afraid, between the tree and the house. Do you have access to it?
I don't have it, I think about 5 or 6 metres.
Yeah.
About 5 or 6 metres.
Yeah, the rear extension is 6 metres, isn't it? So I guess.
This distance here is 5 to 6 metres. Can I just back to the points that Catherine made about the tree? We were approached by residents when I think there were workmen on site doing things, and as one of the speakers has said, there's also the works to do with the flood, the flooding that occurred just the Waterloo. The tree officer did go out then and have a look at the tree, and did kind of carry out an assessment as to whether or not TPO should be served at that point. And because, as Catherine said, that there was no immediate risk to the tree as a result of the proposed development. The conclusion was that TPO necessarily still TPO.
Councillor Susan.
Sorry, have we dealt with all of the questions? Energy.
I'm not aware of any energy saving adaptations, but our policies don't require for plastic extensions.
Councillor Susan. Yes, Councillor.
I asked a question about the impact of the new build, the single-storey extension, on the glass houses.
There's no reason why, if they're carried out, the construction should cause damage to the glass house.
To come back on the TPO, I think we've heard enough in this document and from what people said to say, surely this tree is under threat. And it's perhaps something we will give more attention to when we come to the comments
I
now.
think that's a different subject completely.
It's not a different subject completely with respect, Chair. We've heard in the report that the tree is under stress, or it will be under stress.
But this is questions to the.
Oh, right, okay, we'll discuss it later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Susan.
Okay, I come from a ward where there's been lots of houses, smaller houses that had excessive development, which usually turned into HMOs, and then we've had the officers come back to us, it's just a preempt, come back to us with houses that, developments have been small and have been turned back because of the line. So I'm glad Councillor Line brought this up, because it's an important thing. The building line, okay, these houses are staggered. However,
So
I went on Google Maps.
So this question to not.
Yeah, it's coming to a question.
Well, it sounded like a discussion to be about the law.
Hang in there, mate, I'll get to it. Right,
Okay, but you need to ask a question.
I will, and we've got one coming. You happy?
Short question.
I just want to reassure Marion that I won't Google Maps tonight, and leave the other houses, how big this is going to be. Okay, here's the question, Keith, you ready for it? Okay. If we make an exception of changing building line, and it is going to stop with this large extension, therefore, we can make exceptions in other planning. Is that acceptable to planning officers, that the building line therefore doesn't become a reason in the future to refuse development? That's my first question.
I think my response to that is, I don't think we are actually infringing on the building line, for the reasons that I said in response to Councillor Beaulieu's question. Also, I mean, I suppose the question is, even if it were infringing upon the building line, does actually that cause harm? Because building lines aren't on set in stone. They can change. If you change it, does it cause harm? Because you can make alterations, you can change things, and they don't actually cause that much harm. So our position is that we're not actually infringing upon the building line if the application is to be approved. And even if you did interpret the building line differently to how we're interpreting it, I think our position would still be the same, that this doesn't cause a significant amount of harm to the form and character of the area. One of the speakers mentioned precedent. This doesn't necessarily create a precedent for development in the rest of the place or indeed any other part of the city. We still have to assess the individual applications on their own merit. So I don't think, I mean, you can obviously disagree with us in terms of whether or not the building line is being said. If you disagree with us, then you still need to carry out, you still need to kind of weigh up in your mind whether this causes harm. But the issue of precedent should not be one that concerns you in this case.
I'm glad you're not concerned about it, because now the other question I have has got to do with the difference between the shadow you're going to get from a fence, which was spoken about. Gentlemen, I agree to have a fence between and a boundary line, is that correct? Am I correct in that assumption?
It's actually incorrect.
Ah,
Chair.
I am asking questions, and I get to it. Would you agree then, officers, that the shadow of a fence, which was discussed, or even the agreed 3-metre single dwelling, cast as much shadow as a double-storey extension over the house next door, and therefore depriving them of light even though people might not consider studying 45 too? Would you agree you get the same amount of shadow from a fence or a single-storey 3-metre approved extension as you would from a double one?
I can answer that now.
I mean, you've got Mr. Driscoll's drawings in front of you, I think, I mean, if there is an issue about this application, it is potentially how it affects the study. But the existing, and the issue isn't really whether or not it actually creates a bigger shadow than the existing house. It's how that shadow impacts upon that particular room. Now, the existing property creates a shadow, and the information that we've been prepared by the applicant indicates that that room is already impacted to some degree at certain times of the day. So our assessment is still that the increased size of the extension, it has two impacts upon the study. It has an impact in terms of outlook, and I think that's what we saw in terms of Mr. Driscoll's illustrations of the view from the window. And to my mind, if you were to continue that 2 metre high fence across that window, there would be a similar impact upon outlook in terms of what you can see from that window. If some of the developments built under permitted development were built, again, there would be a similar impact on outlook in terms of what is being proposed here. What we're looking at really, I think, in this instance is the direct sunlight. And even if the window is in shade at some point in time, there will be light getting into that window. And that's the issue that we're kind of looking at. And that's, I think that's one of the points that the agent actually made. That there's direct sunlight and then there's shadow. And I maybe disagree about whether or not the office is a principal room, but in terms of kind of the things that have been established in terms of what is and what is a habitable room, the office wouldn't be given the same weight as a lounge, the primary lounge window, or indeed a primary bedroom window. So well, the point that you made was about the what was about the impact of the shadow. So my answer to that is that some of the development of the fence, the permitted development, like a single or two-story, could have a similar impact to what is proposed here.
Flo.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just go back to the resident who spoke about the impact of the work that's already happened?
No, you can't. That's the answer to the question.
Okay, thank you. What will be done to mitigate the impact on the work as it's happening on the residents, like damage to the garden, front drives, so? Some of those issues are civil matters, I'm afraid. In this case, we haven't asked for a construction management plan. Just check whether we consulted highways. No, we did feel that it was required in this case, but that is something. Perhaps let's
If the development is causing damage, or the works that have already taken place because of the flooding and the contractor damage that have already come into the site, if they've caused damage to Fairmont Close, then from a civil point of view, the site owner, this is kind of going outside the damage plan, where this is not worked out to provide planning permission at the moment. they would still be liable for those, as they would be liable for any damage to any kind of third party properties, if damage has been caused to a neighbour's garden, like a big closure on the curb or something like that, then it does remain a civil matter. And that the person causing that damage, or the person who contracted the work that caused the damage, remains liable for it.
That's a lot of sense. Mike, did you have a question? No, put your hand up. Councillor Stu.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think actually Mark's questions partially answered at the next one, and that was about the final interpretation of the primary route. Just to clarify, can you say that if this was considered primary route, for example, if it was a lounge, would this likely improve?
That's a hypothetical. So it's not what we're dealing with. I think when it comes to determining what is and what isn't a primary route, you have to kind of look at or a habitable route and consider this kind of true definition from the planning point of view. You have to kind of look at the layout of the whole house. It's quite clear that some rooms were designed to have a primary habitable function, and some were designed, given the context of a particular property, and some were designed not to be primary or habitable rooms. And with these are large properties, all the properties on Fairmont Close are very large, so you have to kind of make an assessment as to what is and what is not a habitable room and the context of it.
Yes, thank you. We have been talking about hypotheticals, for example, the application for garage and property, and at the same time, we've been asked to all applications on our merits. So I don't see any reason why we can't have a hypothetical answer to that question.
If it was designed as a bedroom, and as the sole window to a bedroom, in the context of the property, then yes, I think it would cause a small concern. But that isn't, and that's the point. I mean, you refer to the garage as a hypothetical. That, I mean, from a planning point of view, that's referred to as permitted development. We've already granted consent for that, so it is something that we have to attach weight to as material consideration, as are the potential fallback situations from development that can be carried out without planning permission. So that's those materials here is that really to my mind, materials that really is a study, and that's the reason for essentially the objection at the moment. That really is a study.
Okay, no more questions. Councillor Burger? Okay. Okay, we'll move on now to discussions. I will move the recommendation. The recommendation is to approve, but we've got a second of that. Thank you. Councillor Burger, on to the welcome person and Councillor Lowe. Thank you.
So I'm going to try and give you planning reasons why I think inappropriate extension, and I'm going to try and make it just an argument which combines two, which I'm not sure if you'll be happy with them, David, but I think because combining the issue in terms of amenity, and I'm fairly sure that we might actually be seeing, no, I'm not sure, but I think we might actually be seeing advancements in terms of that we will have to consider studies as things that we have to consider in material planning because of the situation of being an shift for home working. So I'd like to take that into consideration as well. But I think there are issues in terms of amenity. It is a really big two-story extension out the back, in combination with issues that the front extension to me makes it out of character, including considerations of what seems to be, you know, the character of a staggering and what I consider building line. So these two, I don't, you know, these two in combination to me does not make this an acceptable extension.
Councillor
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I too agree with Councillor Bowden about the idea of really planning law catching up with the reality of changes that have happened in the recent 18 months. But actually a good working environment should be an environment where there's plenty of light, maximum amount of light. And it's crazy to think that you would class it today as a secondary room to a living room. It must, at some point, fairly soon, in case law, be proved that it is a primary living room. We might be ahead of the game if we try and establish that at this stage in a small way. But I do feel that that is really important, that, you know, to people's lives, they do need a very good home working situation, just like, you know, an employer needs to give his employees good working conditions. So I think that the impact of the amenity to the neighbouring property is to my mind, an important fact in considering refusing this application. I think it is the excessive size also that changes the character of the area. I'm particularly worried about this cedar tree, and I definitely think that we should, regardless of our decision here today, make sure that we get a TPO on it, because it's already been compromised by the works to the water leak. And if that had a TPO, presumably they couldn't have done those works without reference to our tree officer, so that he could have given instructions of how that work should be carried out to protect the tree. So I think leaving it unprotected is, now that we know so much about it, it would be a wrong thing for us to do. So I think, regardless of our decision today, we should ask that the TPO be placed on that tree. And also, regardless of that, a construction management plan, if we already know that there have been problems with vehicles getting around, large vehicles, to undertake work for the water leak, possibly it's pavements that are being damaged and curbstones. And that's not a civil matter, it's actually a matter for our highways. So often we as ward councillors, we see damage done, and yet can you prove who did that damage? No, you can't. You actually have to see the vehicle doing the damage to prove it. And it is actually the public purse that is being affected. And so I really think that's a very important issue here. If the nature of the access is very narrow, then we definitely need a construction management plan to protect footways and to some extent the roadway itself, and if they have to sort of use small vehicles or whatever. So I feel very unhappy about the excessive size of this development and the impact it has on the character of the area, the impact it has on the amenity of the neighbouring property, the impact it has on the tree, and I'll leave it there.
Okay, I've got Councillor Sanders and then Councillor Street.
Thank you, Chair. Very interesting discussion this morning, a range of questions on various topics. Looking at this, the single-storey side extension, I don't have terribly many problems with, other than the fact it clearly is going to interfere with a tree that patently should have a tree preservation order on it. And I'm certain there probably are ways of mitigating that and with an extension. My concerns, however, concern the two-storey rear extension. We're looking at a 6 metre high by at least 6 metre long wall topped by a pitched roof, solid brick. and it faces onto someone's place of work. It's described as a study, but we've heard from the person speaking at the start of this, that it's their place of work. It's not really a study somewhere where they go to occasionally to, I don't know, back, let's say for a university or something. It's their place of work. They work in the creative industry, design. I don't know about you, but I would find this extremely impressive. I can remember when I first became a councillor, one of the first planning decisions we made as a councillor concerned, again, a 6 metre long by 6 metre high wall abutting someone's garden and destroying the view anonymity. And this is the question we have here. We're looking at the quality of life that's being disturbed. Were this extension at least halved, I possibly have not too many objections to it, but the sheer size and massing and the effect it has on the adjoining property means I cannot support this application.
Can I just ask a question, just on Mike's comments here? They said they work from the home. Did they say they work out of this room? I don't think they did say they work out of the study. You both work out of your study.
Yeah.
Okay, so you think I was big enough, because you could use that for anything, couldn't you? Turn it into a kitchen, bedroom, cupboard. Well, that's a bedroom, and my bedroom. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think this application is about balance. I think all the elements are quite finely balanced, and I've been persuaded one way or the other about all five of the elements today. In fact, I wasn't particularly worried about the tree until we heard about it today. I do have concerns about the tree and its short-term, short to medium term. I don't accept that the glass house is not impacted by it. It is enormous, this development. The roof of the garage side extension is unnecessary. It could be flat. It could actually have its own glass top that reflects the glass house next door. The garage, I think, protrudes too far, and the building line is a consideration here. But not only that, I think the design of the front is poor, and it won't fit in the street scene. If this particular development was in the nearby conservation area, which is just across the road, I think it probably would be turned down flat. However, this is next door to a listed building. That listed building is important. Number 13, Lime Tree Road is absolutely unique. Nothing like it in City at all. And evidently, this greenhouse is also quite impressive. So on balance, and balancing all those things, I can't vote in favour of this. And I think I've covered it. Thank you.
Okay.
Just to, because I can have a feel for kind of how this is going, but I don't know how we'll deal with this, Chair. But I'm just kind of, I'd like to give the committee some advice before we kind of move to a recommendation.
We've not had a recommendation. There might be other members.
We haven't had a recommendation yet. Councillor Maxwell, you want to speak first?
Thank you, Chair. I think, like everybody else, I'm going backwards and forwards and trying to work out what it looks like in my head. Yes, I did see the monopoly board. So I find that this is something that we should have gone on a site visit for, because there's a lot of people here having different opinions. I've changed my mind about 6 times, and I'm not happy to go on it, I've got to be honest. But I really think if it's not too late to go and see this, we'd all be a lot further in what they want to do. I'm probably going to have to abstain because I can't make it either. Thank you.
Fantastic.
I think the report has been very thorough. We've seen, we've seen great deal of detail, and Catherine's report is very extremely well written, and I think we've seen.
It's not that.
Yeah, I'm just following up. And I know you were criticising the report. I'm just saying I think we've seen enough to make a decision today, and my mind is made up, and can our members do have the ability to abstain if you need to.
Okay, I believe the best way forward is been moved and seconded, the recommendation to approve. If we take that route first, and we'll see what happens. And then someone will have to make a recommendation straight afterwards. How do you want to speak straight after? Okay, I'll move to the recommendation now is to approve. All those in favour, please show. That's no one. All those against, please show.
Sorry, I'm going to have to take a recorded vote because that's how we do things. Okay. So, and bear with me because you're all over the place. So keep hands up until I call your names, please. Those voting against are councillors Youssef, Councillor Graham, Councillor Bergline, Councillor Lubbock, Councillor Button, Councillor Stukeley, Councillor Everett, Councillor Sands, Councillor Sands Sue, and Councillor Sands Mike.
And 3 people not voting.
And then those abstaining are Councillors Peake, Councillors Maxwell, and Councillor Driver. I'll just say you didn't move that one.
Oh yes, but we have to do it that way because that's the way it works.
So now that application has been it's not determined that the majority voted against it, so now need to vote on the reasons why that was refused, and something needs to move and second that, please.
Councillor Bergman.
Yeah, shall I move a recommendation to refuse it if we can try and bring all the reasons together that everyone. So I'm concerned about the immunity to number 2, and I'm concerned that it is out of character for the area due to the mass and due to the protruding of the building line that I have seen. And then I think Councillor Lubbock might want to also include.
Well, you put those 3 there, but I think the building line wouldn't.
But I take that in consideration
in
regards to out of character. But I'm happy to include in my recommendation what I want to put. I think it's important to put all reasons forward, is what I'm saying. So I would also put forward that there is concerns to the tree, and there is concerns to a building which is in how do you formulate it? It's in a connection to a listed building, and therefore as an extension considered of value.
Councillor, I still need a second or anything else to do.
I'm happy to second the reason the new
Proposal.
but I think it's a bit difficult on grounds of the tree, because there has been an assessment that it won't damage it. Well, obviously our tree officer doesn't feel that it's under any threat. So I'm a bit concerned about that, but regardless, as I say, I think we ought to recommend that there is a TPO put on it, but perhaps the officers will say whether or not we can include the tree. And again, we don't have any evidence that it is going to affect the glass houses in the Grade 2 style listed whole sort of comfort, well, the whole land. But if we don't have any evidence, can we use that as a reason for refusal?
Dave?
I think there's two reasons for refusal for this, and I think they are the impact upon the immunity of the adjoining neighbour, and in particular loss of daylight and from what members have said, loss of outlook from that ground floor study room. Then the second reason for refusal that I would advise you to go with is the form and character argument, and in relation to the in relation to the single story element coming forward of the front of the property. I wouldn't. I mean, there's some points of detail, I guess, but I wouldn't recommend. I wouldn't say build in mind as such, but I think there's a form and character arguments to be made. There's possibly also a form and character argument to be made about the two-story rear extension kind of being, I think it is mentioned in the committee report that it's actually visible over the top of the roof to number 2, and therefore is visible in the street scene and increases in the mass. I wouldn't refuse it for the tree, because we've got advice that whilst it might have a short-term impact on the tree, that it will survive that short-term impact. That's the advice from our tree officer. Similarly, whilst I understand the concerns about the glass house, I wouldn't refuse it for those reasons either, because we've got advice from our conservation design officer that they don't think it has the impact that the members are describing. But I do think the form and character and the amenity issues are defensible reasons for refusal.
Can I just jump in there? If you go back 2 or 3 slides, you'll see the view. There's a view from the road, that one. So that demonstrates, or you'd be able to sort of see where the 2-story section would extend.
Councillor.
Yes, I'm happy with the proposal so far for refusal. I would argue on the M line that glass house is effective, but I'm happy to take advice at this stage. It would not be necessarily defensible, but I genuinely believe it would be, because I've read the M line several times over the last couple of hours, and to me it seems like it would have an impact, and just the massive would have an impact, because it is a heritage asset in listed property. I think if this was elsewhere in a conservation area, the whole thing would be refused on a single basis. And so because it's adjacent to this property is a reason on its own. However, if the officers think that is not going to calculate the reasons, because they're just as compelling.
The greenhouse has really got 3 sides, hasn't it? One side is a brick wall, and any glass. The bit that's leading up to the boundary is all brick, and there's just a glass bit going up to the wall, and glass side.
There's 4 sides.
So it's glass going down the side of the wall.
It's a domed building, it's not leaning up against the.
And there's glass going down the side of the wall.
Yeah, you can see it in the.
I told you, I can see it.
You can see it in the picture there. It's glass on all 4 sides. I think the point about it being built up against the wall, possibly originally, was that the conservation officer was possibly saying that there was a boundary wall at one point, not that it was kind of a lean-to structure against the wall.
Councillor Sands, Mike?
I do believe that the most compelling argument against this is the sheer size and massing of 2-story extension and the effects it has on the amenity and lifestyle of many that come to. And I believe that that is the most compelling reason, is what we should promote in refusal of this.
Okay, thank you. Dave, have you got a rough idea what would be the person on this? we leave up to the officers to write the report.
So shall I make my recommendation? So, okay, so it would be on forming character of the area, those the including forwards, and also being able to see the bridge of the others, and it would be immunity issues in relation to number 2. And I'm actually happy to take DM9 as well, I mean, we might as well, if there is a threat to a heritage asset. But David, you can persuade me right now.
I mean, if we were in a position where no one had known about the glass house because it wasn't, so let's say the listed property wasn't listed, but it was kind of a locally historic building, and we'd come across this glass house in the back of the property, then I think we could be in the scenario that Councillor Stevie was describing, that it's kind of almost like an undiscovered heritage asset.
And is there anything in our policies that is concerned with damage to non-known assets? It might not be DM9.
I don't. I mean, I hear the concerns because obviously it's a glass house and you have to be extra careful working next to a glass house, but there's no real reason. For example, the snug was built at some point next to the glass house, and that it's a bigger structure that we're talking about, but it's no closer to the glass house than the existing snug. And indeed, the whole house was built relatively close to the glass house, which would have been in possibly more intensive works in the area. So there's no real reason why building something where the single story extension was supposed to go would actually harm the glass house, physically harm the glass house in its own right.
Yeah, fine. So if you're happy in to use this thing.
Okay, the recommendation is moved and seconded.
Being seconded by Councillor Lovett.
And then move to the vote. All those in favour of the recommendation, please show.
Again, a listed votes, please. And so that's councillors in favour of refusal. That's councillors Youssef, Councillor Graham, Councillor Boweline, Councillor Lubbock, Councillor Button, Councillor Stukely, Councillor Everett, Councillor Sands Sue, and Councillor Sands Mike.
All those against, please show.
Against refusal,
No,
Councillor Driver.
Abstentions?
Abstentions, Councillors Peake and Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you very much. Recommendation has been reclused. Thank you.
Well, yes.
If we,
Refusal has been approved. It
Yeah.
says. It has been refused.
okay, if we can just adjourn for about 5 minutes,
Yeah,
we have to let the visitors disappear and it's all going to be a bit.
Chair, I will leave our visitors out and then obviously members can then take a break, and I'll suggest that we meet back at
10 to, we don't want too long, do we? No, 10 to, be great.
Chair,
Yes.
apologies, I have to leave the meeting.
Yeah.
10 to 10.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sorry to hear that. Yeah. isn't it?
Actually, strictly, it's not.
I know it's not.
Probably that 12.
No, 10-2. Okay, we'll move on. Cameron, you will take the Norwich Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Right, so the next item is installation of a shepherd's hut. Apologies, that should be number 6, Music House Lane. Next slide, please. So number 6, Music House Lane is on the corner with Music House Lane and Ruin Road, and apologies if I said that, mispronounced that. The site itself is stepped in from the road to stop round the corner. You've got a grassed area, and there are I think 2 or 3 trees as well. The building itself is of some age, but it's not listed or locally listed. And the back of the building, to the northeast, is a small paved area, and then there's a group of dwellings, including a row of 4 terrace properties, which part of a relatively new development called St. Cecilia's Court. The proposal, sorry, next slide please. Proposal is to site a shepherd's hut. This is a way of providing additional, want of a better word, office space without actually physically extending the building. The building itself is used by Sue Lamford Trust, and they are an organisation, a charity, that provides talking therapy to people that have been victims of sexual abuse. And the idea for this is to provide somewhere for children to attend, which is separate to the main property. And there's a small gate, as you can see, there's a footpath on the south-east corner, there's a small pedestrian gate. So if desired or wanted, families and children can actually walk straight into it from there. Next slide. So the proposal is fairly standard shepherd's hut design. It's been reduced slightly following discussions with the agents, or reduced in height. So the maximum height is touch under 3 metres. It will have wheels, but it's not intended to be to move around the site. It's intended to be positioned and retained there. And then you've got a few steps leading up to the doors at the front. The only window on the side elevation would be facing the main building used by the trust at the moment. So next slide, please. So this is a view from Music House Lane. As you can see, there is a difference in the level of the road. The building itself and the adjacent paved area is fairly flat, and then the gardens serving the terrace properties are slightly lower, but it's not as a sort of significant change of height level as you can see on the road. It's more subtle once you get within the site. And you can see in the background, you've got the church, which is St. Julian's Church, which is listed, and you've got the boundary wall between the church grounds and the site itself, which is just finished in a concrete sort of style render. So this is just showing a bit more of a close-up. As you can see, the garden serving terraces also have close border fences. The maximum height is 1.8 metres of these fences. There are slight variations of 10 centimetres or so because the land isn't precisely flat. This is a close-up of where it will be positioned. So as you can see, there's a telegraph pole, and there's a slightly lower section to the area which is served by slabs to gain access to the doors, part of the hut, so northern and part of the building. So in order to position the hut, they would need to actually extend that tarmacked area to create a base large enough to position it. And so the report identifies 4 main issues. The principle is considered acceptable. The proposal is that the current use of the main building is considered to be similar to a health centre, which is community use and covered by DM22. And DM22 supports increased provision within centres if it is acceptable for the location, scale and function. And given that this is a city centre location, expansion of community uses is in principle supported. The second issue is design. So Shepherd's Hut is perhaps more akin to a rural setting. However, in recent years they are become very popular, and it's not unusual to see them within people's gardens and other locations. And given that the intention is to provide therapy for children, it is considered to be an acceptable sort of proposal. And the impact on the wider character of the siting of the hut there isn't considered to be significant. As we saw from the photo looking from the road, it would be sited some way from the road. It would be partially screened by the existing boundary wall and would be seen within the setting with the relatively large trees and the buildings alongside it. The next issue identified is the heritage, which I've slightly mentioned in terms of the character of the area. The property itself is within a conservation area, the city centre conservation area, and it's on the edge of 2 character areas within the city centre conservation area. So it's on the edge of King Street character area and First Street character area. However, these conservation area appraisals have a huge amount to say about this location. It doesn't identify the site particularly. It does, as you would expect, mention St Julian's Church, which is Grade 1 listed, and notes that there's a boundary water in place there because of the difference in levels. The impact on the church itself, there isn't really anticipated to be much at all. You won't be able to see the hut from the main entrance side of the church, and from this side, as I said before, the hut will be seen in a wider context, and its impact is considered acceptable in terms of heritage. The next issue, last issue is amenity. If you wouldn't mind, David, to zoom on photos again. So the one before would be that. So these properties, their rear windows and gardens face southwest towards the Sue Lambert Trust building and the paved area. They currently enjoy levels of light which would be obtained from this area and also from Music House Lane itself. The siting of anything in this paved area would eventually have some impact upon these properties because of the distances involved. However, the following discussions with the agent, revised plans have been received and re-advertised on, which show the hut, as mentioned before, right up against the boundary wall. That wall already creates some overshadowing, as does the main building to these properties. And so our consideration of the impact upon the neighbours has to take that into account. And so yes, there may be some degree of additional overshadowing, but because of the orientation, the amount of light received from elsewhere, and the existence of the boundary wall and the main building, we don't think the impact in terms of overshadowing is going to be significant. The application form includes proposed opening hours, which would be 9 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock, and this would just be Monday to Friday. So this is considered to be sort of fairly usual office hours, and obviously would relate to the fact that this is a building intended for use by children. When people use the hut, yes, they'll be walking up steps. Yes, they may well be able to overlook to some extent into the gardens. However, these neighbours' gardens aren't entirely private at the moment. Their adjacent neighbours have windows which look into their gardens, and Sea Lambert Trust has windows as well which look into them. So whilst we note that there would be an impact in terms of potentially overlooking and the noises of them who were coming and going into the hut, we proposed adding a condition which would restrict the use to 9 o'clock to 5 o'clock, enabling these neighbours to continue to enjoy their gardens in the evenings and at the weekends, sort of largely as is. The only other condition to note, apologies, that's an update sheet. So moving on to the update sheet, we've suggested 2 additional conditions on top of the proposed 3 in the report. A condition is proposed which would request the exact details of the slab level. So before the shepherd's hut is installed, the agents would, or applicants would have to tell us their exact proposal in terms of extending that area. And why we think that's important is because we don't want it to be raised at all, with mindful of minimising any overshadowing to those neighbours to the right in Cecilia's Court. The second additional condition is one that would stipulate that the shepherd's hut shouldn't be moved about on the site. So whilst it is shown on the location plan right up against the boundary wall, because it's on wheels, there is a small risk that it could be moved. And just to be sort of completely clear about it, that additional condition would ensure that it's only retained by that boundary wall. And the other item on the update sheet is that there's a statement received by our neighbour, which I believe Dave will read out in a minute. So to conclude, the application is a committee today because we've received 4 objections, and our recommendation is one of approval. Thank you.
Okay, great, Kevin. Dave, just want to read a statement. We've got the speakers.
This is a statement from one of the neighbours, which I'll be debating. The object actually refers to the Sue Riley building, although it's actually the Sue Lambert building. The Sue Lambert building seems a large building. I have to say I was surprised to learn that an outside hut was being necessary. Unfortunately, a new location for the hut puts it directly behind my garden, meaning we will now be able to see and hear people using the hut. It was also disappointing to realise just how visible the hut is going to be over our fence. This means it will partly spoil our view of the Sue Lambert building, which we always enjoy. At the moment, I clean up any litter on the grass areas outside Sue Lambert building. Plans for the hut go ahead, and some thought we needed to tidy up the outside area so that everyone gets a better view. I'm very happy to discuss how this might be done.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to questions from members. Any questions from members? Councillor Smokeshanks.
Somebody just seen the slide where the raised houses with the 2 French doors. There's a, that's the one there. Yeah. When the houses adjusted to accommodate the shepherd's hut, it won't stop those doors from being open, but they will still be able to be open.
Yes, it's understanding that the shepherd's hut would be sat slightly to the, as we're looking at the right of the telegraph pole, and so the doors, things of double doors, that should be
Any other questions, Councillor
Thank you. I maybe I can quite interpret the drawings. It looks to me like it's going to be very gloomy and limited. In the shepherd's hut, the only window is one that faces another building, but there don't seem to be any windows facing forwards. And the other thing is just behind the main building. There's this little alleyway which doesn't go anywhere. I'm not sure. I'm not clear if you'll be able to walk between the hut and the main building. I suppose I'm a little bit concerned about creating an asphalt magnet in that little passage, but I'm not sure if it's publicly accessible anyway, so it might not be an issue. So it's the back of the red area where the shepherd's hut is. Yeah, that's exactly there. So that
in terms of the amenity for the shepherd's hut, I believe the doors, the double doors at the front are glazed at the top. Thank you. In terms of the alleyway to the north, because of the difference in land levels, that little path shown to the front, you walk along that and then you get to like a raised ramp, which is set up to reach the first floor of the main building, along the north. Yes, so there's a door in the middle of that elevation. And so that's basically a raised sort of ramp and staircase. So beneath that is just empty and plain. So there will be some access still to that part of the site, but the whole area is managed by the trust. The gate to the pedestrian entrance for the southeast can be locked. And I think, from memory, there's a gate to the southeast, to the other. There's some containers there as well.
Okay, any other questions? We'll move on to the recommendations to approve, and I will vote for second for that. Discussions, anyone? Councillor Suzanne?
Yeah. The sensitive nature of the classroom here is going to occur in the shepherd's hut. I think my concern is less about neighbours and people visible to them than the children who are going into the hut being visible to neighbours. I would like to recommend some kind of a fence or something higher than the fence, between the shepherd's hut and the fence, erected to allow the anonymity of the children who are going into the hut. Watching
I just want to say something on that. We make a recommendation to put the fence up a bit higher, that would be less similar to the people's plans a bit behind. Yeah, that is one. Yeah.
I propose my concern more about what the use is rather than but the sensitive nature of what they're running for and the sin.
I just think neighbours should very good and not really objecting to this, but we've got the fence up really high and that they object with the road coming to the council. So
I hear the concerns, and I was thinking about that as well, but then I thought their trust do with those children. So I would like to think that they take safeguarding seriously, and they would see people coming in through the front door anyway. So I'd like to think that they deal with these matters. So I have less concerns about that because I think that's what they do.
Okay, any other discussions, anyone? Councillor
Sorry to speak again, just a quick one about the hours. The place is open 9 till 5. I wonder if we should give them a bit of leeway for packing up.
probably asked for that already.
I've been in contact with the agent and said that the recommended conditions would be 9 till 5, and they've replied saying that they're happy with it. So I think they should take that into consideration.
Thank you. Okay, we will straight on to the vote. There's no other discussion. Rules all in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for that. And we'll move on to the last item now, which is the new Perry Yard, King Street.
I just need to clean it all down.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
Councillor
We've got to have a spray up and water down and then move in and then move back. Okay.
we could use the other microphone.
so you can do, I don't mind. Want to see that chair? Thank you for doing that.
Okay, Jacob? Now Councillor Evans left, don't he? So we'll, so if we can take this through, Jacob.
We're looking at application 21000247 at New Ferry Yard. Site is located towards the eastern end of King Street. As you can see from the map, the sort of riverside flats that back onto River Winton. You can see the Riverside Leisure Centre is just above from there, which might give you an idea of where the location is. Just go to the next slide. Just to give you some quick context on the site. The freeholder of New Ferry Yard also owns the adjoining developments at Albion Mill to the north, west, and Hartman Yard to the southeast, which were all constructed as part of the same development, which got commissioned in 2004. 6 flats in Albion Mill recently lost their on-site parking, which was as a result of the sale of Schoolers Wharf, which is located just beyond Albion Mill. On the map. Albion Mill is a Grade 2 listed building. There was no underground parking provided to the building as part of the original conversion of the flour mill. The residents of Albion Mill have historically relied on the underground parking provision of New Ferry Yard and Schoolers Wharf for their parking, which is guaranteed to them on their leases. And therefore, the purpose of the application is to address the shortfall in availability of allocated parking resulting from the sale of Swins Wharf through the provision of 4 additional parking spaces. Let's go to the next slide, please. So you can see an aerial photo of the site here. You can sort of see that the subject area is quite pleasantly landscaped parking area located directly to the front of New Ferry Yard. The existing parking spaces are angled towards the property at a 45-degree angle. And a variety of low shrubs and a range of trees of varying sizes and maturity in place around the parking area, which contribute to the sort of leafy character of the streets, and especially on view from King Street. Just go through a few photos so you can consider that as like at street level. So this is looking up towards the east of the site. This is sort of quite leafy green character. Next photo, please. And this is a little bit further up King Street, looking on to the space, the Maltings, which you can see on the side plan. It's just below the underpass parking area. And it's just on the next photo, please. And this is looking west, and you can see Albion Mill in the background there, sort of flanking the car parking area. The site is located within the city centre conservation area and within the King Street character area. Please go on to the next slide, please. The proposal looks essentially to redesign the existing car park to facilitate 4 additional parking spaces, and this includes the regularisation of 3 temporary spaces that have been in place since at least 2019, and these spaces are labelled in the existing plans for clarity as numbers 1, 2, and 3. Just go to the next slide, please. So the proposal would see the reconfiguration of the row of parking spaces adjacent to the very yard. The space between the hedgerows would be slightly widened to create 1 additional space on the southeastern end of the row. This is shown as number 4 on the marker. The applicant also looks to provide an electric charging point in this location to service this newly created space and the space immediately adjacent to it. Just run through a quick summary of the issues outlined in the report. In terms of design and heritage, it's worth noting the previous scheme on this site was refused partially on design and heritage terms due to the impact of removing trees and landscaping compared to the conservation area. As part of this revised scheme, all trees are retained and a small amount of landscaping, 2 metres squared, will be lost to facilitate the additional space on the row of parking. This is considered to be aesthetically minimal, and all hedgerows, which are removed to facilitate parking space, will be replaced on a matching basis. It's also considered that the impact of the proposal on the character of the conservation area will be negligible due to the small scale of the alterations. It's also worth noting that both the council's tree and landscaping officers have stated that they do not object to the proposal. A number of representations of this application have been received. We received 3 letters in support, 1 neither objecting or supporting the application, 4 an objection. The main issues raised in the objections relate to the principle of development, potential for amenity impact and transportation issues. Regarding the principle of development, objectors questioned the need for additional parking in this location between Albion Mill, New Ferry Yard, and Malt House, which is just this last apartment building at the bottom. There are 162 flats and 156 parking spaces. So the provision of 4 additional spaces would still fall within the council city centre parking standards of 1 space per dwelling in the residential development. In terms of amenity, there has been concern that additional noise pollution and light disturbance will occur for residents living in ground floor flats and New Ferry Yard. However, it's considered that the impacts generated by the 1 additional parking space at space 4 will be minor, with the impact restricted to the small periods in which the allocated car will be entering or exiting the parking space. Concern has also been raised by objectors regarding potential for congestion and increased activity around the proposed charging point spaces. The applicants made it clear that all spaces will be allocated and available only to the residents to which the space has been allocated, and as such, amenity concerns relating to the spaces are not anticipated to be any more significant than regular parking space. And finally, just on transportation issues, concerns have been raised relating to some transport issues. Highways have expressed no concern regarding the layout of the spaces. The applicant has shown that there is suitable space for access and egress from all the spaces. all but one space fall within the 4.8 metre by 2.4 metre minimum required by the Norfolk County Council parking standards, except from space number 2, which is adjacent to the street, which is 2.3 metres by 4.8 metres. This marginally smaller width is considered acceptable in this instance, given kind of more open location of space and there's sufficient room for other cars to move around it. These are the main concerns highlighted. What concerns are addressed fully in the report. In terms of updates, no formal updates have been received. I did speak to a resident from Nico Yard last week on the phone who expressed an intention to write in. And whilst we haven't received the representation formally, his concerns mainly related to the visual appearance of the electric charging point. One of the recommended conditions is that the details of the appearance of the charging point are submitted prior to installation. So hopefully those concerns are covered by the conditions. So in summary, the application has been referred to the committee due to objections to a minor application, and it is concluded. It's concluded that the impact on design, amenity and transport related issues is acceptable in accordance with the local plan and the national planning policy framework. So the recommendation is to approve with the following conditions: protection of the on-site trees in accordance with the agricultural report, retention of the electric charging point after installation, and for further detail of the appearance to the charging point prior to installation. That's
Okay, thank you, Jacob. Questions for Councillor Sands, Mike?
Thank you, Chair. The provision of electric parking space, electric charging point, if the parking spaces were allocated, and I had to say I think the parking space 10, but the electric charging point is parking space 5, how do I then go about charging my car if the parking spaces are allocated?
So I think that that's really going to be something that the management of the development is going to have to address in the future. One of the things that highways raised is that it would be good to prepare all parking spaces for potential for future electric parking spaces, but it's largely at work is completely outside the remits of this application to require that they do that. But I guess there is potential for scope for electric charging points on the site in the future.
If that was the case, would the applicant have to come back to apply to put charging points in those additional parking places, or could they simply go ahead and do it?
Thank you. I mean, there are some permitted development rights for the charging places. I need to check whether they apply in conservation areas. But I suspect that going forward, those permitted development rights will probably be extended. But they'd like to be development for the application to us.
Any other questions? Recommendations to approve, and I'll move that for a second. Any discussion on this? Go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of the committee. Thank you very much.